Okay, so we're going to do our lesson today from a message. I hate to use the word lesson. It feels like I'm at Seven Hills and teaching at the school when I say lesson. So our message today is from Proverbs 3 verses 27 to 35. And some of you may be really glad to see that we're going to look at less verses in more depth this week, which I'm very excited to do. Some of you may also be very happy that we're not just talking about wisdom on it in and of itself this week. I know I'm very glad that we can change the pace a little bit. And that's really great, but then I looked ahead at Proverbs 4 and it's again back to the subject of wisdom. So we're still going to have a lot of fun with that. I'm not sure how I'm going to do chapter 4 just yet, but right now I'm thinking that I will probably not divide it at all. I think I'll just go for chapter 4 all in one go and try and tie wisdom into the gospel. If the Lord gives grace and I can do that, then that will be really awesome. If I fail, then it's my fault. But we'll see. And if you guys want to read ahead over the next 2 weeks, or try to do it within the next week, because I need to prepare in time. And just let me know if you like the idea of doing all of chapter 4 in one go, or if you want to do it divided a little bit, then feel free to let me know. Okay, so starting from verse 27. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come again. Tomorrow I will give it to you, when you have it with you. Do not plan evil against your neighbor who dwells trustingly beside you. Do not contend with a man for no reason, when he has done you no harm. Do not envy a man of violence, and do not choose any of his ways. For the devious person is an abomination to the Lord, but the upright are in his confidence. The Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the dwelling of the righteous. Toward the scorner he is scornful, but to the humble he gives favor. The wise will inherit honor, but fools get disgrace. Amen. So as I said, today we're shifting gears a little bit. When you drive a car, you have to start off in the first gear, and that puts some fuel into the motor. I think I'm using the right words here. This is just what people tell me. I don't even know if it's true, but apparently when you put the car into gear 1, it opens the motor so that some gas can go into the engine, and then when you change it, it opens it more so more gas can come in. So we're moving into another gear today is what I'm trying to say, because we've looked a lot about that foundation of wisdom, and we've piled layer on top of layer of that, and it's been really beautiful to see all the different things we could say about wisdom as we've gone. But now Solomon wants us to put more of a structure onto what we've already built. But he does this, at least the chronicler does it really clever here, where he adds this lesson about how to treat people, how to deal with people. And that in and of itself is foundational, because the book of Proverbs is full of information about how to deal with people, how to treat other people, how to work with other people. And so this is part of the structure that we're building on the foundation of wisdom, but it's also a foundation stone of it in and of itself. So we're going to build up all these different towers of information based on what the book of Proverbs says. So right now we're looking at dealing with people. Other times we'll look at dealing with anger. Other times we'll look at dealing with bitterness. Sometimes we'll look at gossip, things like that. All these different ideas are throughout the whole book of Proverbs, and so we'll build up all those towers as we go through the whole book. And hopefully that will turn out really awesome. If not, blame me. So here we have practical advice on how to treat other people. And so we have to start this message off by asking ourselves, do you struggle with relationships and knowing how to handle other people? I think for a lot of people, the immediate answer is yes, absolutely. It's people are difficult, right? And just when you think you're getting to know someone and you can be friendly with them, then wham, they throw something at you and you're like, well, where did this come from? Friendships are tough. Relationships are tough. Families are tough. Colleagues are tough. It's hard to deal with people. But the book of Proverbs today is going to help us see some of those things that we need to do when we deal with other people. And so Proverbs in and of itself, and the whole Bible really, is just full of advice on dealing with people. And as I said, we're going to build on that foundation today. And so we'll see the results of how we succeed in that, and we'll also see some of the results in how we fail in that as we build on this. That's not really anything we haven't seen already. If you look at the end of the passage, it's pretty much saying stuff that we've already studied, so we won't go too deeply into that. But our main focus today will be on verses 27 through to 31. And just a quick note on the structure of the passage. I know we don't really want to come into too many technical details in these studies, but I think it's important here. If we look at verses 27 to 30, we see one idea there, these series of do not do these things. And then we kind of see a transition at verse 31, which is also a do not, but then it transfers into a kind of consequence in verse 32. And then verses 33 to 35, they kind of pile everything up on together to help us understand everything we've seen about wisdom so far and how it applies specifically to this situation. So we start with verse 27. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due. And that's the starting point here. And that's the first of our do not commands of this section. And so we all have things that we have to do. We all have things that are good to do. We all have to pay rent. We all have to pay maybe mortgages or debts or whatever we have, student loans. I'm sure most of us have those, or if we don't, we will. We all have to pay taxes. None of us particularly enjoy paying for those things, but the Bible tells us to pay what we owe, and so when we do that, we're doing something good. And we're called to pay them. We're not called to withhold those things from people when we owe them to them. But what about other things? Because we can talk about all those things that we absolutely have to do when we go to jail, or we have to pay a fine or get into trouble for if we don't do them. But what about those little things where the consequences aren't so serious, where it's just like, oh, well, I might lose a little bit of my possessions, or I might just lose a friendship or something. It's not as serious as losing all my money or going to jail, right? So like things like when we give our word, so someone needs help to build his house, and you say, yeah, when the time comes, I'm going to be there. I'm going to help you build your house. And then when the moment comes, you find some excuse not to do it. Or maybe there's only two people married in this room, and I'm one of them and my wife's the other, but that's what I wrote in my notes. If you guys ever get married, hopefully you all will, but keeping your marriage vows, that's giving your due, giving what is owed to someone. You said you're going to do this, you're going to provide for this person, look after them, provide for their needs, and you have to do that. So whatever is good for us to do to others and is our responsibility to provide, then we are obligated by the scriptures to do that. That's what we're being told today. And just as an aside note, that's why we should be very slow to jump into any kind of commitment, because the Bible is very clear that when we say we're going to do something, unless some mediating circumstance comes in, then we are called to fulfill that, and we're sinning if we don't. And so, just for example, if a husband promises to look after his wife and he stops doing that, then he's sinning, right? And if you say, okay, I'm going to help you build your house over the summer, and then summer comes and you just want to go and play games and go to the swimming pool all day, then and you say, no, I'm not going to do that anymore, then you've not given what you've promised to give. But then sometimes there are these occasions where we've promised to give something and some circumstances happened in our lives and it's made it impossible to fulfill what we've promised to fulfill. And that's something we should think about, because does that mean that if I'm not capable of fulfilling what I've promised to fulfill, that I'm sinning? Well, that's why Solomon says in the rest of the verse, when it is in your power to do it. So don't look at that as a kind of get out clause that, oh, okay, I can find a way that it's no longer in my power to do it. That's there just in case we end up in a situation where we've promised to do something and it's no longer possible. And so let's just say, for example, you promise to help your friend build his house over the summer, and the day before he needs your help, you get hit by a car and you're in hospital. Like, what's going to happen then? Are you sinning because you can't leave the hospital with all your broken bones to help your friend build his house? Of course not. You're not able to fulfill that commitment anymore. And so this attitude, it's also contained there and continued in verse 28. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come again. Tomorrow I will give it when you already have it with you. So it's not really written very helpful there in English, when you have it with you. It's something that you already have. Like, it's not something that you have off in your house somewhere. It's something that's on your person right now that you could give. So like you need to give someone 100 lei. You've got it in your wallet right now. It's in your pocket. It's not like it's in your house and you have to run over and get it. It's an immediate thing. But when we read this, we have to understand what a neighbor is, because I think quite often we look at that as a word, and we're so familiar with it being used in the Bible that we don't quite resonate with what it actually means. We kind of got an understanding that it's people around us or our friends or our family or whatever, or our co-workers, but we don't really go too deep into what that means. And so in your own time, I'd encourage you to read Luke 10, verse 29 through to verse 37, because that's a really good verse, a passage that talks about who our neighbor is. And basically, Jesus says there, the person who is our neighbor is those people around us that need us, those people that need our help. And in that story, we see that all sorts of people walked past this man who'd been beaten up on the road, this Samaritan man that no one wanted to touch. And they found excuses not to help this person. And that's a perfect example of what we're seeing in this passage as well, that being able to help someone but coming up with some reason why you won't help them. And in that context, we even read that the person that asked Jesus who was his neighbor, he was trying to justify his way out of it. And that's exactly what we do. We try to find ways out of helping people. We try to find ways out of doing what's good for people. And so when we see that we are just like that person that says, oh, who is my neighbor? Well, we know who our neighbor is. It's anyone who needs our help. And we only ask that question sometimes so that we can find a way to get out of having to do those good things. So we like to ignore the goods around us, the needs, around us, and we have a tendency to say, well, that thing there, it's not really relevant to me. It's not something I can do anything about, therefore I'm not going to worry about it. But when we really think about it, all needs are relevant to us because we are called to care. We're called to look after people. We're called to do good unto all people wherever possible. And even if we can't specifically do something in a situation to help someone that we see in need, we should still have our hearts going out to those people, realizing that they're in need and sympathizing with them in that need. But let's just think about it more practically about what could go on around us. We all have friends, we all have family, we all have acquaintances, and some of us maybe even have enemies. And we know people that struggle financially. What are you going to do when you see someone struggling financially? Are you going to say, okay, here you go, I'm going to give you what you need? Or are you going to let them suffer when you're able to help them? Someone needs just a little bit of your time just to either help them with something or just to be with them because they're going through something, and you find some excuse to say, I'm just too busy. I don't have time to do that right now. Like people in hospitals, that really speaks to me a lot because I've been to visit people in hospitals so many times, and when you get there and find out that nobody else bothered to go and see that person, it's heartbreaking when you see that. And okay, we can be thankful that one person did do it, but it should be more. People in hospital, our brothers and sisters in Christ in hospital, they need people around them. And we should be those people willing to go to them, even if it's inconvenient for us. And likewise, there are people that need help. Like I said, people need to build their houses. Some people maybe need help with the garden. Some people maybe need help with a bit of babysitting. Some people maybe need help with, cleaning their house because they're so busy with other things trying to provide for their families or whatever. There are single mothers that have like 5 kids that we could help. There are people in prison who just need someone to be with them. There are people that we don't even know in hospitals that we could go to and just spend time with them if necessary. And so we see all these needs around the world, and we look at them and go, well, someone else will take care of that. But we have the ability to help these people. We have the ability to do what's right by people, and we shouldn't be looking for excuses to not do those things. We should be looking at our hearts and saying, I have the ability to do this. I'm going to go and do it. And so that means that we should always be on the lookout for ways to do good towards people, right? But how do we do that? Well, in our immediate context, that means building relationships with one another. The more we get to know the people that are in our day-to-day lives, whether that's our colleagues or people that we hang out with, or church members, or even family members that we don't know so well, the more we get to know them, the more we're going to find out what needs they have in life. And the more we find out what needs they have in life, the more we can be an influence and help them. And I've just amazed at the amount of times where I didn't know someone and the Lord gave me an opportunity to get to know someone or an individual. And then later on you find that they have this need, and this person opened up to me because they know me. I've spent the time investing in a relationship with them. So he now knows he can share his need with me, and I'm in a position to help him because the Lord has provided either time or money or resources, whatever, to be able to help that person. So when we build relationships, we find ways that we can help one another. But then there's another problem that comes with that. how do we choose who we help? Because we are finite. We can't help absolutely everyone, can we? So if 100 people come to me and say, Robert, I need counseling and I need it this week, well, I can't cover 100 people in a week, right? I can try, but I've done the math. It is possible, but it would be very tough. So at that point I have to say, right, okay, well, these needs are probably more pressing. I'm going to help these people, and maybe these people, if you want to go to that person and help, so we can work together in that. But that's also where we have to start listening to wisdom, because we've seen that wisdom calls out as she's in the marketplace saying, come on, listen to me. Don't listen to all these voices around you trying to sell you all this nonsense. Listen to me. And when we have that situation where we're caught between two things, where we see a need that someone has and we can help them, and in one hand we hear that voice saying, come on, don't waste your money, come on, don't waste your time, don't waste your energy, don't waste your efforts, and on the other hand we hear that voice saying, yes, go ahead, do it, you've got to do it, you've got to help that person. We have to learn to discern the voice of wisdom in that moment. And then just to make this really practical, and just to give you a little conundrum to work with, let's say you've got a friend who's in debt with 100 lei, and you've got another friend who's in debt with 10,000 lei. Well, who are you going to help? Okay, you can only help one of them. Let's just say you have 100 lei and you can only help one of them. Well, a lot of people would say, okay, well, I'm going to help the guy with 100 lei because then his debt's wiped out. The guy with 10,000 lei, that's too much. No one's going to be able to help with that, right? Sounds logical, yeah? Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're getting it. Okay, so then naturally that's what you do, but then when you ask more questions of the situation, you realize that actually there's more information that we need to uncover here. So we find out that the guy who's in debt with 100 lei, he's in debt with 100 lei because he didn't have food to provide for his family. He's working hard, he's working 80 hours a week, and he just didn't have enough money that week, and he had to go into debt to buy food for his family. Whereas the guy who's 10,000 lei in debt, he's 10,000 lei in debt because he bought a car that he didn't need just to have a nice car. Well, if you can buy a nice car with 10,000 lei, probably not, but he's just buying something that he doesn't need. Well, that, when you ask questions of the situation, it opens up the doors a bit more, and you say, well, of course, sorry, I got the numbers mixed up there. The guy that's 10,000 lei in debt, he bought a car to provide for his family because they didn't have a car and they needed it. Sorry, my bad. It's been a long day. And the guy with 100 lei got into debt because he really didn't need to. Forgive my blunder there. You get what I'm trying to say, yeah? You ask questions of the situation and you see questions like, right, why are they in this situation? What would my help do for this situation? And, work out those things in each situation that you find yourself in. And every situation is unique, which is why we have to be wise as we make those decisions on who we help and how we help them. So just again, as an example, we're living in Romania. Some guy comes up to you and says, hey, can you give me 10 lei? You're not going to give 10 lei to that guy. At least I hope you don't, because you're not actually helping him. But you could give 10 lei to a ministry that helps the poor, and that would then help him, first of all, get the gospel in his life, which would be made more profitable, and it will provide a soup for him. That sort of thing is what I'm talking about here. Okay, so I'd also just recommend looking into your heart and reacting first of all, to the things that are closest to your heart, because the Lord places these things on our hearts to help people. Some people, they see that there's a need for supporting a missionary in Africa, or for paying for an orphanage to be built in Africa, or even going to Africa on a mission trip, or just being a missionary there full time. People see that kind of need and they jump at it because that's what the Lord puts on their hearts. In other cases, other people see that sort of thing and they say, well, of course it's a need, and we're very sorry that that's the case and that needs that need, but it just doesn't resonate with them so much. Whereas something else more locally might resonate with them. So, just as an example from our lives, we love to give books to people. I think everyone in this room has benefited from that. If you haven't, you will eventually. Because we've seen how books change people's lives, how they help people understand the scriptures and then bring that joy about. And since me as a missionary, I'm so invested in people's spiritual lives, that's what really touches my heart when it comes to helping people, is giving them literature, teaching them the truth, giving them the gospel. So that's just to say that we don't all resonate with the same things when it comes to how we can help people and what the Lord places most closely on our hearts is what we should be focusing, assuming that our hearts are in line with his will. So the point is to not withhold. We all have abilities to fulfill people's needs, and so let's pray that God would show us those needs through building relationships with people, and help us and encourage us to do what's right and provide for people as we can and we're able. And if we fail to do this, it's like your best friend asking for 100 lei to get out of debt, and you say, "Oh well, I can help you, but come back tomorrow." But you've got the money with you. It's silly to do that, right? You wouldn't do that to your friend. You wouldn't do it to a family member. If we do start doing that, it's because we want to use it as a weapon against our friend or our family member. There are some people that just find pleasure in watching people suffer, and they know they can help, but they just let that go on for whatever reason. And other people do it in a sense of pride. They realize that that person relies on them now. They need you, and you can kind of hold them in your grip if you say, "Well, I'll help you, but it can't be right now." And other people just they withhold so that they can get a favor later on in life. Well, okay, I'll give you 100 lei, but just so you appreciate it, I'm going to give it to you tomorrow. And after that, you're going to owe me something else another time. I think we've all been in situations where we've been on the receiving end of that, as well as maybe even the giving end. And so what does our passage say about that? It's very clear. Don't do it. Don't wait. If you have the ability to fulfill someone's needs right now, do it. Help those people. Be wise and calculated, absolutely. Don't just throw yourself in and do something without thinking. Don't just throw money at a situation. Don't just give away all your time and your energy or whatever to something that isn't going to be helpful overall. Think about things. Listen to the voice of wisdom in your life. But don't mess around. Don't give it a chance to manifest into something bad, or to make someone suffer for when you could help them so easily. So as we keep going through these do not sayings, we see in verse 29, do not plan evil against your neighbor who dwells trustingly beside you. And here we are specifically talking about calculated plans, like someone's actually plotting, he's making an idea and planning against someone. But I think it obviously applies to any evil that we have. Don't do any evil to anyone. That's a pretty biblical statement right there. But just in the context that we're dealing with, we have to ask ourselves, where are we guilty of this? Where are we guilty of planning evil against our neighbors? And if we all look deep down into our hearts, I think we'll all see that we're all guilty of that on some level. And let us just ask ourselves, do we plot against our friends because they frustrate us? They said something, they made a joke and it overstepped the line, so we start thinking, okay, right, how can I get back at them when we're in a social situation and I can say something to him or her and ruin their reputation? Or what about family? Sadly, some families just have people on edge all the time, fighting against each other, and some families sadly have like little camps forming within the family where the mother takes the children and says, right, we're going to go against the father, and then the father takes his brothers and says, right, we're going to do this with the kids and we're going to leave the wife out. Horrible sort of things like that, but sadly they do happen. Probably more relevant to everyone here is getting revenge on a boss. If a boss has reprimanded you and you say, I'm gonna get that guy for this, and so you start thinking, okay, what can I do? I'm gonna ruin the guy's reputation, so let's make this email and write something about him and tarnish his reputation for a rumor, send it anonymously to all my colleagues. Some of you may be dealing with those temptations right now as we speak. And this is especially important to keep in mind when we think about those who are closest to us, like a spouse, a best friend, a mother or a father. When we do this, when we plot against each other, when we plot against those that are closest to us, it just destroys and ruins relationships. And we need to learn to just say, look, I was hurt by that thing and it was bad. It sucked. It was terrible, but what am I going to gain other than this superficial sentiment of pleasure if I plot against them and then ruin this relationship further? And so how are we to deal with this? Well, we cultivate healthy relationships, and We don't plan to do these things. And what we have to do is learn how to resist it when it does begin to become a problem, because I don't think there's anyone in this room that's not struggled with that at some point in their life, to get revenge or to plot evil against someone. Well, how do we deal with it? First of all, we have to realize that the seeds of this sin are in all of our hearts. Even if they've not grown root, even if the flower's not budded, the seeds of this sin are in our hearts. We naturally want to do this thing to come out on top in our lives. And just as an example of that, we guys, we talk, we have a great chat. We watched a movie and we're like, yeah, we love that movie. Or we read a book and we're like, yeah, that great theology book. And we're just having the blast talking about it. And, we could fly all the way to the moon and back and be in complete unity talking about how great this book was. And then just suddenly a thought might come to your mind that says, what if I just insulted this guy for no reason? Any of you guys been in that situation? Just a random thought like, oh, I could just punch this guy. Like, I wonder what would happen. Yeah, you ever had that? Yeah, don't need to be too honest. Likewise with you girls, maybe you're talking about the clothes you wear or the way you've done your hair, and you're just happily discussing that, and you're having a chill time together. And then just suddenly in your mind, this idea appears that says, I could just give her a backhanded comment right now, like, oh, wow, it must be so great to have the courage to go out wearing that, Yep, yeah, okay, all the women are laughing about that. Yeah, you get it. I know your secrets. Yeah. Yeah. Well, just hit them where it's real. That's what I say. But this all makes sense to all of you, right? You've gone through this. You've experienced these kinds of thoughts, right? Okay, that's proof that the seeds are in our hearts. Because even if we don't act on those thoughts are still bubbling up from deep within us. Bless you. And manifesting themselves in our thoughts. Even if we don't act on those thoughts, they're still in our minds because of what's in our hearts. And so, as we recognize that, we can then begin resisting it. Because that's the first step. We have to recognize what the sin is in our lives. We have to recognize what's tempting us. And then as we recognize that, then we can resist. And so those seeds can easily start growing, by the way, even if they've not taken much root in your life or any root at all in your life right now. Keep what we're talking about here from Proverbs in your hearts. Keep them in your minds, because this temptation can just, wham, get you in a moment. And you don't even know where it came from. It just suddenly got you and brings you into that death spiral of sin. Someone could just randomly say something really harsh to you that you just weren't expecting. It could be a close friend. They're just overly harsh with you in a moment, and you're just like, where did that come from? And then immediately that thought starts coming into your head of, I wonder what I could do to get revenge. Or you invited someone to a party and they didn't want to come, or you wanted to just spend some time with someone. You just wanted to invite them to your home or invite them to a coffee or whatever, and they just left you on scene, that's that sort of thing. We've all been there as well. When you experience that kind of hurt, your heart is probably going to start plotting. It's going to come up with ways to get revenge. You think, I could slander that person. I could say bad things about them. I could ruin their reputation, or I could start rumors against them. I could start saying, well, he did that or she did that. And you could start excluding them, like, we're going to have this party, but we're not going to invite that person. That's the kind of things that we do when we're hurt by people. And that's the kind of revenge that we start plotting against our neighbors. So when you find yourself to start thinking this way, you need to cut those thoughts out. Because if we don't start cutting those thoughts out, then they could very well become a reality. We often talk about psychopaths, how they go off on mass murdering sprees and whatnot. And they call those people psychopaths, but really they're just consistent with their thoughts. They're just consistent with what's in their hearts, because those things are within all of us. The Bible's very clear that just on that subject of murder, murder is a form of anger. Anger is a form of murder. When we are angry at someone, it's like we wish they were dead. That's what the Bible literally tells us. And so you can imagine someone gets angry and then kills someone, and then next time when they're angry, it's easier to kill again, right? And then this whole idea of them becoming a serial killer, it just bubbles up out of that. So I wasn't planning to talk about that, but I'll just finish the thought. There is no such thing as a psychopath. They're just people that are sinners, and their sin is really boiled up to the surface, and they're not so restrained in their sin. so that's why we need to cut off those thoughts when they come to us, so we don't end up like that ourselves. And yes, okay, we're all covered by grace, and we all know that we'll not end up in that situation where we become these psychotic killers, but we have to watch ourselves still, because we're still prone to the results of that sinful thinking. And I think I've talked with you guys a lot about the idea of taking off what is sinful in our lives and putting on that which is holy. I think we've talked about that here in these sessions. No? Blank faces? No? Okay. In simple terms, it's Ephesians 4, I think verse 23 to 24. It talks about taking off that which is sinful in our lives and replacing it with that which is good. So, for example, the story of the man who was demon possessed, and they removed the demons, and then the demon came back with 7 of his friends. It's no good to just resist these things and push them out. We have to replace them with something good, otherwise the bad will come back. And I guess we'll talk more about that in coming weeks, because I think that's a really important principle, and I use it in most of my counseling, because it's just the reality of how to deal with the sin of our lives in the Christian walk. It starts off by cutting out that thought. Just do whatever you can to get away from that thought that's popped into your head to get revenge against your friend or your family member, and in replacement of it, think about Jesus. Remember that he's called you his friend. He's called you his brother, his sister, and he's forgiven all of your sins. You've sinned against him. We've all sinned against him more than anyone has ever sinned against us, more than anyone has ever done anything wrong to us, and yet he forgave us all. And so when we remember that gospel truth, when we realize that, and we start thinking about the revenge we could get against people for how they treat us, and we remember that we've been forgiven for more than they did against us, very quickly that desire starts dying out, right? Because we're focused on the cross. We're remembering what the cross did for us, what Jesus did for us on the cross. And we cannot remain in sin when we're so focused on him. The more of him that's in our lives, the more we reflect and meditate on him, the less room sin has to grow in our lives. So remember his forgiveness, and likewise forgive those who sin against us. And just another side note, if appropriate, speak to the person that hurt you. I've lived 30 years on this planet, and it feels like a lot, but it's not much. But for what it's worth, we hurt people so often without even realizing it. And when we're hurt, it's so often that people don't realize that they've hurt us. Especially for us guys, we like to make jokes, and we make a lot of stupid jokes to one another, and we hurt each other. And I know one person in this room has been the recipient of that. We won't say who it is, but thankfully he forgave me, and we're good. But actually, I'll use that example. I hope he doesn't mind. I won't use his name, but basically someone was late to a couple of things once, and a few of us made a big joke about that, and it was just something that we kept making jokes about all the time, and we upset that person quite badly with that, and me especially. I crossed the line way too many times making those jokes, and it evidently upset said friend, and he just said, like, you're hurting me with these jokes. So we stopped, and we tried to stop. I think we probably didn't do a good job of stopping right from the beginning, but maybe still fail sometimes too. But so that's just the point. That person came to me and said, look, this isn't helpful, you're hurting me with this. And so when we do talk these things over, we didn't realize we were hurting him. It wasn't intentional, but he was being hurt. So that's where you say cut it off, and he helped us realize what was happening. So going on to verse 30, we add a bit more depth, and I'm going to start going a bit faster now because we're running out of time. Do not contend with a man for no reason when he has done you no harm. So we aren't to argue with people for no reason, and we're very good at that. Man and woman, we're all very good at that. Children are very good at that with authorities, and we're very good at that with the government. We like to say, actually, that's just what the government does, I'm not going to complain about it, and then launch into a 5-paragraph statement about what we hate about the government, right? We're all very good about that. But the Bible here is telling us not to argue with people for no reason. Obviously, there are times for discussions, robust conversations, and dealing with things, where be it theology or someone's wrong attitude about something, or confronting someone in sin, or helping someone in the workplace to realize something. There is a place for that, but to do it without a good reason is when it's a problem. And that creates a spirit of quarreling among us, which then divides the church, because we cannot have unity while we're fighting over stupid things. And wives and husbands especially, we'll skip over that bit because that's only relevant to two of us. Brothers and sisters, pretty good at that, just fighting over things for no reason. Oh, that's my toy. Well, no, it's both your toy. Yes, it might have been bought for you, but you're in the same household. Share it. It's a good thing to share with each other. Just as an example from my life, when we first came to Soli Deo Gloria, it was a lot of burden off of our backs because of one of the reasons was just dress code, because you're wearing a suit to church all the time, wearing a skirt as a woman, and the batik. If you want to do that, that's fine, but when you don't want to do that, that's tough, and it's not pleasant, especially in the summer. You're wearing a suit to preach, and it's just there's waterfall coming down while you're trying to preach, and you can't raise your arms because otherwise everyone will see everything, but you forget and you raise your arms anyway, and then you look back on the camera and you realize, oh my goodness, just massive pools there, and anyone want to go swimming after church? So for us it was a great relief, a sigh of relief to not have to worry about dress code so much. And so I saw people coming to church in shorts even throughout last summer. So I was like, well, I'm going to come to church in shorts because why not? There's no reason not to do that. Now that might offend some of you, and I'm sorry if that's the case, and we'll talk about it afterwards. But
Youth Center.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the heretics for that. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the story I'm driving at. Someone came to me, and he said, "Brother, I understood that you were a Reformed Christian. Why are you coming to church without trousers?" I was like, "Oh, is this a problem? Okay, well, I believe God looks on the heart, and if everyone around me is okay with me wearing shorts, then it shouldn't be a problem." And I asked him, "Are you offended by this? Is this a stumbling block for you?" With the full intention of no longer coming to church in shorts if it were a problem for him. And he said, "No, no, no, no." I was like, "Well, why are we having this discussion then? If you don't agree with what you're arguing for, and you're not offended by this, then what's the point of this discussion?" I won't say how it ended because it wasn't too pleasant in that particular instance, but it just shows the point that some people just want to start arguments, and that was very much one of those cases. What do we do with that? Well, we realize that it starts here with us, and if there is a quarrel that someone starts with us pointlessly, then learn to cut it off from the start. Like say, well, I don't really see what's profitable from this conversation, and just correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you just want to argue about something, and I've got no interest in that. I just want to go on the paths that we all agree on, love you as my brother or sister in Christ, and focus on that. And there's no shortage of things that we can quarrel over. There's many different things in theology that we can yell at each other over. People disagree on what sports team is the best, and they can spend hours talking about that and yelling at each other. TV shows, some people like this movie or that TV show, and how can you not like that? That's my favorite. How can you not like that? We've all been that person, and we've all seen people like that, right? Yeah, it's like someone's a dinosaur right in front of you, just like rah, right in front of you. It's like, okay, calm down. So what we have to ask ourselves is, what do we gain from this? What do we gain from arguing with people over nothing? And the answer is that nothing. So you argue over nothing, you get nothing back. You build each other up in something good, it gets a good mutual good for each other. So instead of arguing and quarreling with each other, let's learn to build each other up. Let's learn to stop making stupid jokes all the time. And I love jokes, guys. You all know that. You all know I love jokes, and you all know that I can cross the line sometimes as well. It's better to just not make jokes like that all the time that are for people's expenses. And this is me preaching to myself as well, in case anyone thinks I'm being a hypocrite, because I would be otherwise, because I often cross the line with people. Let's learn to not make so many jokes, and let's learn to build each other up with words of encouragement. Let's talk to people about their spiritual lives. Like, how is your walk with Jesus right now? Are you good? Are things going well, or are you struggling with anything? Do you have any needs? That really ties in with what we studied earlier. Do you have any needs that we can help you fulfill? Share your Bible discoveries with each other. I love doing that. When I read the scriptures, I read a whole book from the New Testament in an evening, and I see this thing that I didn't realize before, and I've got to find people to share this with, and use that as fuel for a good conversation. That's really great. And so that's a much better way, don't you think, to model Jesus and to love one another and build one another up. So again, seek opportunities to do that rather than to make jokes all the time. And you guys can all hold me to account when you come to games nights in the future, and I'm making jokes. So finally, in the do nots, I promise we won't go too much longer. And finally, in the do nots, we have do not envy a man of violence and do not choose any of his ways. Again, it's easy to think that this is not for us because it's just such a weird thing to think that I'm going to be envious of a guy who's violent. But again, the seeds of this are in our hearts. We see someone speaks people down and we think, oh yeah, I wish I could be that oratory myself and just speak these people down like he does. Or physically, like we men especially, we like to be macho and like, I'm going to beat this guy down. I'm going to show him who's boss. Like when we see people that are able to do that, unlike the rest of us who can't do that, and we like to think, I wish I could be that guy. I just have that confidence to just speak that guy down and beat him down if he needs it. Or even emotionally. I mean, that one specifically for you girls, you have you've wired more emotionally, so you're better able to manipulate each other's emotions and other people's emotions. Am I fair to say that, or am I crossing a line there? Yeah. Just lording it up over each other and manipulating that way. So I think that is relevant to us, but we also have to remember the cultural context. Solomon is addressing mainly groups of young men, boys here, and I guess they're macho boys or they're soldiers and they're ready to go out to battle, and they envy those epic soldiers that are fighting and that sort of thing. Again, we can think about the modern day where there's this really sad movement in the church right now, the church in general around the world, that says that men need to be aggressive, and there's a sense for that. If someone breaks down my door and tries to kill my wife, I'm going to be aggressive in that moment, right? But aggression in and of itself is not a characteristic of Christ-likeness. It's a bad thing. We're told to be gentle in the fruits of the Spirit, and so if we're constantly living in an aggressive way, then we're not fulfilling what the Bible tells us to do, and we're being like that. We're being envious of people that are like that if we say we should be aggressive, and that's just not what the Bible calls us to do. So Solomon brings this all around in verse 32. This is where the transition starts into the second section. For the devious person is an abomination to the Lord, but the upright are in his confidence. Well, withholding good, being violent, planning evil, all of that, they're all forms of deviousness that we've looked at today. The wise are called instead to forsake such practice because, as Solomon told us, the upright are God's confidence, and we want to be in God's confidence. We don't want to be against him. We don't want to be counted among the wicked. So if we want to please God, we will resist. If we want to be an abomination, then we will be devious. And so that's the path, again, laid out before us, the choice between good and evil that's laid for us. And so our passage then closes with familiar words, starting in verse 33. The Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the dwelling of the righteous. Towards the scorners he is scornful, but to the humble he gives favor. The wise will inherit honor, but fools get disgrace. So doing right leads to blessing. We've seen that time and time again. Be upright, be righteous, be humble, be wise. Doing wrong, on the other hand, it ultimately leads to the curse. Being devious, being scornful, and holding to wickedness and foolishness. And that's the path that leads to destruction. So we've seen various ways that we should deal with people, and maybe that was a lot for everyone to take in. So if anyone needs me to go back over anything in the discussion time, I can look back at the notes. We're constantly dealing with people, and we have to learn how to do that in a righteous manner. And this message has just been the foundation of helping us to see how we can start doing that. But above all, Jesus is our perfect example of how to deal with people in a wise and righteous way. So study his life, study his righteousness, and there we'll find the way of how to deal and treat people. Amen.